Hi, my name is Rob Armstrong, and I grew up in a very small town in northern Ontario of about 500 people. And, my dad always had a job, but we didn't have indoor plumbing and we didn't have central heating in our house, which was a bit rough when you grew up in northern Ontario. So I never thought of ourselves as being poor, but we clearly were not middle class people. And when I was little, my mom would take us to church. I can remember going to a Pilgrim Holiness church when I was a kid. And then at about 8 or 9 years, she stopped going and she would send us by ourselves. My brother and she would dress us up in the morning and send us off to church. And it really was when an aunt of mine who had been involved with Child Evangelism Fellowship moved into town, and she started having kids clubs meetings in the community hall. And she would bring a speaker in and have programs for kids. And I can remember very clearly at being 9 years old and sitting in one of those meetings in the town hall, and the preacher was speaking about the difference between heaven and hell. And I can remember very clearly having this conviction that I was a sinner and I deserved the punishment that he was talking about. That as a sinner, I was separated from God and I would spend eternity in hell. And so I remember just sitting there that night, and when the speaker asked if anybody wanted to pray a prayer and to accept Christ into their heart, I prayed that prayer and really went home with a sense of relief. I was 9 years old, continued on in going to Sunday school, going to church, but really without any support from my parents. My dad was not a Christian, and basically part of the reason was he was, as a young child, taken to church by his parents, as most rural people were, and someone in the church said to his dad, "If you can't dress your kids better, don't bring them to church." And my grandfather never took his family back to church again. So my dad really grew up without any sort of Christian influence. And the good news of that story is both of them I saw saved, and both of them were baptized in their 70s, and I got to witness that. But for me as a young child, having this sort of faith and understanding of my Christianity, it was not very well formed. And I can remember sitting up late at night and worrying about whether I was really going to go to heaven. Was that conversation I had good enough? Was I going to be saved? Was I going to be taken to heaven one day? And at 10, 11, 12, 13 years old, I remember many times sitting there at night and asking God to save me again, just in case the first one wasn't good enough. And it was very troubling for me as a young man. And then when I was about 19, I had been going to Bible camps and to Sunday school, to kids clubs, and really thought that I had worked out my faith reasonably well. And I decided to go fishing one day, and to make a long story short, I was sitting in the bush about 6 miles away from any vehicle, and I drove an axe into my knee, just around the kneecap, right to the bone. And so there I was, lying there, quite troubled, thinking that, what am I going to do? I walked about half a mile or so up over a hill. The friend that was with me was going to go get my van and come back in through this logging road and pick me up and take me out. After sitting there for about 4 or 5 hours in the rain, in the cold, it was dark, and I was convinced that he had got lost and he wasn't going to make it back, because he should have made it back in that period of time. And I started to feel afraid. I remember reaching down and rubbing my leg and realized that a huge pool of blood had accumulated in my pant leg, and that I was losing a lot of blood, and I didn't know whether it was going to be something that I was going to be able to recover from. So at one point, I remember just saying to God, I'm terrified. I'm going to die here. What's going on? This is not what I had planned for my life. And I can remember this as clear as the day it happened. Hearing a voice and it's a verse from Hebrews 13, I will never leave you and I will never forsake you. And feeling this sense of warmth and comfort. It was like somebody took a warm blanket and put it around me. And the thought was, going through my head was, do I really believe what I've said for the last 10 years that I believe? Do I really believe that death is simply a movement into eternity with Jesus Christ? And at that moment, my mind and my heart got together and they said, yeah, that's absolutely what you believe. And from that day on, it has never been a doubt in my life. And I don't have a lot of respect for death anymore, because really what I look at is, on that day I said, God, if you take me, if I don't survive the night and I die, then I spend eternity with you, and that's fantastic. And God, if you desire to keep me here on earth, then it's obviously you have something for me to do. And that's the way I've tried to live the rest of my life. And that is sort of my story of being saved, and how I came to faith and how I really embraced my faith. Thank you.